This video we will be focusing on how to obtain your first bismuth nugget using thorium fuel and then how to scale and automate that production. Now the reason for using thorium fuel is out of all the early game isotopes of uranium, plutonium and thorium, it has one of the best chances of 40% of giving you a bismuth nugget in return out of the SILEX. Now for automating this entire thing I am going to use thermal expansion. You can use any other item transfer mode or just skip the entire thing and do this entire process manually. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get straight into it and see how to produce bismuth. Step 1 is processing thorium ore in the most efficient manner possible. Now in the early game, most of us aren't gonna have access to the ore acidizer, so I'm just going to use the good old centrifuge. Now in the centrifuge, thorium ore isn't gonna get tripled like it usually does with the other ores, it's just gonna get doubled with the bonus of obtaining uranium and some gravel. So here you can see we got 2 pieces of thorium powder, 1 piece of uranium powder and also 1 piece of gravel. Now that thorium powder will go inside a furnace and here it will be converted into a thorium 232 ingot. This is the main thing that we are going to use in order to make billets. Now in case you didn't know this, in this mod thorium has only a single isotope which is thorium 232, unlike the other isotopes of uranium and plutonium which are many. Now in the cyclic assembler, 2 pieces of thorium 232 ingots will be converted into 3 pieces of thorium 232 billets. Now these billets will end up in another cyclic assembler and here they will be converted into fuel rods. So once we get 2 ingots in the first assembler, now you can also do this in a crafting table by the way, we'll get 3 pieces of thorium billets. Now these thorium billets when combined with an empty rod will give you thorium 232 fuel rods, thorium 232 rods basically. Our next step is actually converting these rods, the thorium 232 rods, into thorium fuel rods, and in order to do that we are going to use a breeding reactor. Now in case you didn't know this, breeding reactor can actually input items from its top and output items from its bottom. But in order to ensure that the output is working perfectly, just use a servo on the bottom side of the breeding reactor. So as soon as I connect this duct like this, all of the thorium 232 rods will start going in, they'll start traveling and find the breeding reactor which is empty and which is the closest to the ducts. So here comes our fuel rods, and as you can see they landed in the third breeding reactor here. Now that all 3 of the breeding reactors are full of thorium 232 rods, we need to see how much flux we need, and in order to convert thorium 232 into its fuel rod form we need a total of 500 flux, and that can be easily provided using uranium 233. So that is what we are going to use as a fuel for this case. Now if you are using uranium 235, then you will need to place 2 research reactors instead of a single one, as uranium 235 doesn't provide as much flux as uranium 233 does. So just fill up the research reactor and leave 2 gaps like this, as you don't really need so much fuel in order to produce 500 flux. And once you have placed all of the fuels like this, raise the control rods by 100% and then start the research reactor by placing in a neutron source which is the radium 226 beryllium. And once that's done, the research reactor will now output 500 flux, or basically 502 flux on all of its sides. And also make sure that one of the side of the research reactor is empty, otherwise the reactor will just explode. So as soon as the breeding reactor will start receiving all of the flux of the research reactor, it will convert the thorium 232 into its fuel rod form. This fuel rod will then travel down the line and end up in a cyclic assembler where it will be converted into thorium fuel billet. So yeah, thorium fuel billet, that is what we need. And as soon as we end up with 8 of thorium fuel billets, these 8 thorium fuel billets will combine with an RBMK fuel rod in order to give us thorium RBMK fuel. So let's just wait for it. And 3 more rods should be coming in now. And there we go. So now all of the 8 thorium fuel billets have been converted into thorium RBMK fuel rod. Now this is what we need in order to deplete in an RBMK reactor. So here is an example RBMK reactor that I have made, and as thorium is not self-igniting, you will need to kickstart it using another neutron source. Now once it will start depleting, just leave it there and the higher you deplete, like the more percentage you deplete, the better results you are gonna get. So I would recommend depleting it over 80%. So yeah, now this is a very poor example of a depleting reactor. I would recommend making a good depleting reactor from anywhere that you would want to. And yeah, I was just short on time, so I made this. Now once the thorium fuel rod has been depleted, it will give you thorium driver fuel pellets. Now these fuel pellets can be recycled in a SILEX. So here I'm going to place my fuel pellets in a SILEX, and by the way, in order to recycle them, you are going to need infrared radiation. So not even visible light, you are going to need infrared radiation, which is available pre-Bismuth. And also in order to operate the SILEX, you are going to need some hydrogen peroxide. Now once the fuel pellets will be converted into their liquid form, which the SILEX can actually process, place down a CO2- laser crystal which will produce infrared radiation, and just start your laser. There we go. And with this, the SILEX should start processing fuel into tiny pile of long-lived nuclear waste. This is what we needed. So collect as much tiny pile of long-lived nuclear waste as you can. As next, we are going to deplete it in a waste drum. So here I have 9 pieces. Just take them and place them inside a nuclear waste disposal drum. Now once you leave them in for a long enough time, they will be converted into tiny pile of depleted long-lived nuclear waste of thorium. Now as it is a long-lived waste, it is going to take much more time compared to a short-lived nuclear waste. But yeah, just be patient. And once you have all of the tiny piles, combine them in a crafting table to obtain the depleted long-lived nuclear or depleted long decayed fuel of thorium. Now this fuel or this decayed nuclear fuel can go inside another SILEX, and using infrared radiation, you will get a 40% chance of obtaining bismuth nuggets. So that is why thorium is one of the best fuels in early game in order to obtain bismuth. Now this was how to obtain your first bismuth. What to do when you have or once you have obtained enough bismuth nuggets? Well, you can use the zirconium fast breeder or the bismuth zirconium fast breeder in order to make its pellets, and then use this fuel rod in another RBMK reactor to deplete it down. Once the zirconium fast breeder has depleted down, the bismuth fuel rods have depleted down, that is, they will give you their fuel pellets like this. And the process is once again kinda similar as we did with the thorium fuel. Take this pellet and just process it in a SILEX, and this will give you a 43% chance or a 43.3% chance of giving you a bismuth nugget. So this is another way that you can scale your production once you have obtained bismuth. Now another reason that you will need bismuth in order to do this process is you need visible light in the SILEX, and to produce visible light you will need bismuth. Now another good thing or another good way is using plutonium 241. Plutonium 241, when it has been depleted, you can process it in a SILEX in order to obtain its short-lived nuclear waste form. The short-lived nuclear waste will then deplete, and after depleting, it can be processed in another SILEX, and that SILEX will give you a 60% chance of obtaining bismuth. So here we have the decayed version of the short-lived nuclear fuel, and as soon as you process it in a SILEX with visible light, as you can see, it has a 60% chance, which is much better than the 40% chance of thorium. So that was all I had for this video. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, do smash that like button, and also let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of it. Peace out my guys, stay safe.